Okay, so I guess I'm gonna get into the ego, explaining what it is, and this is gonna like really help you. Like if you don't know about this stuff, this is like the first step for mindfulness and like spirituality, basically. Like one of the most enlightening, or one of the most awakening steps to take once you understand how the ego works. Because I'm gonna go over the functions of the ego, and you're going to understand these functions, and those functions you will now be able to be mindful of as much as possible. And then to a certain extent of how mindful you're going to be is your dedication. And then of course people have their own karma and their own stuff to get through, so it might just be your karma to have to deal with your ego to a certain extent for a certain period of time. So the ego, like, so we all, like, the ego in the most really basic sense is what tells you to put your spoonful of food into your mouth. Like if you didn't really have an ego, you would like I don't know, Ram Dass said this, or maybe Terrence McKenna, like you would be eating the dog food and not know that like that's not your food, that's the dog's food. But so the ego in a more complex sense, and this is the stuff that you are trying to dissipate, is it's first off, it's a thought, right? And so you are not your thoughts, that's for sure, because you can actually learn to stop thinking, and we'll get into that a little later. Um, and it's also, it's based on actual fear, and it is also about satisfaction, and yeah, and trying to, and it's also an image that you have of yourself. And so we'll go into the image. The image is not attainable. The image is not real. It's a social construct. You are an ever-changing experience, basically. That's what you are. But many people walk around with an ego, and the ego says, I am this. I am better than this many people for this reason. Or I need to go make this money and buy this car because I am this image. This is me. And so people will go throughout their life trying to fit into the image they have for themselves temporarily. And I say temporarily because that's what this is, because it's not a real thing. The image is not a real thing. It's a thought. Um, you don't actually ever become the image. You might temporarily trick yourself that you're the image, though, when when you buy that car and you start flexing it, when you start making more money than other people, or when you start becoming very good at a sport or something like that. And so where it gets iffy is people will just they might have a complex image, but at the end of the day, a part of the image is they're better than most people, or they're better than at least like half the people, or something like that, right? And so this is where it gets iffy, because they start to interact with the world trying to fill this image of being better than people by putting people down. So that's what people are doing when they are putting people down. They're trying to temporarily trick themselves that they are the image that is better than people that they have in their head. They have this image of superiority, yet they know deep inside, the body and the mind and the soul understand that they are not this image, but the ego is in so much control that it's kind of like tricking them that like the image is attainable. You just gotta attain it. You just gotta do. You gotta do this. You gotta do it over and over again. So like it's basically just like your ego is in control, and your ego is trying to tell you that the image is attainable. And so people that put people down all the time, they just have a inflated ego or a weak ego. And then there's so many levels to this. Like the ego is a function, and it just can get 10% worse, 20% worse, 30% worse, 40% worse, and like and you can see this in people. Once you understand all the functions, you can understand like how out of whack are they, how fear-based are they, how focused on fitting into an image are they, and what is this image? Is this image based on superiority or not? And so the people that they're like the people at the highest end of the spectrum of like an inflated ego or a weak ego are narcissists or psychopaths. It's so like it's the whole thing, like it's the whole self-image of like you're this great person, you are so much better than everyone else. So the thing with narcissists are they always put people down, and they're always putting people down because that's them temporarily telling themselves that they fit into the image of superiority, because when you're talking down to someone you innately feel that you are much better than them. And so that right there explains narcissists to you to a pretty big degree. Like if you just observe someone's actions and it's always coming from a place that's trying to put them into their temporary image or their image temporarily, that's what's going on. They're narcissistic. But there's levels to this. Like there's like an average, there's some people that are not really held down by this, but there's a lot of people that are, and it's again a spectrum. So like a normal person will definitely have functions of like trying to temporarily impose superiority for themselves. They're still definitely trying to fit into that image they've created for themselves, and it can be toxic. Like a lot of people are actually toxic people, like, but they're good at heart, and it might not be like really in your face like toxicity, but if you really are paying attention, like they're not really there for connections. They're there to reassure themselves that they are the ego that they've created for themselves. And the whole reason that dissipation of the ego is taught is because if you haven't caught on yet, the type of ego that's in our civilization and that has all these functions that I'm talking about makes you act out in the wrong way. It makes you put people down, and it makes you not look for connections with people. It makes you look for superiority and power. So yeah. And a lot of this, and it's so, we can say this is all built on fear, because that's what this driving fire is. It's the fear that you are not the image that you've created for yourself. There's this fear that is the gasoline for the machine that goes out and tries to temporarily impose superiority, and or temporarily impose the feeling that they are this image, because it's all coming from a place of fear. Like, shit, man, like I don't, like, what am I? Like, I'm actually not this cool guy with the cool car, and I'm not like at this level because of that. Like, they know it subconsciously, like really deep inside, yet they're told nothing smarter. Like, they're told like this is the way it is, and so it's just a constant battle that people go through. And then our civilization as a democracy also tells people that you gain fulfillment by doing well economically, obviously, and then the big one is you gain your fulfillment by material values. And this is just false. This is false. And this is what messes with our satisfaction in the ego, right? And also not being able to attain the image messes with our satisfaction, right? And material values and getting all these material values are all a part of that image, right? But so just the fact that gaining material values do not make you satisfied is also what makes people go around a lot with some degree of emptiness, some degree of unsatisfaction. And this satisfaction is again filled temporarily by putting others down. Or it might not be super explicit, like putting someone down, but it might be like they like to outperform in a sport or a video game, and that makes them feel better temporarily. But it's a never-ending cycle, and it's all built on fear, because you are not the thought. You are not a thought. You are not an image. Yet people trick themselves into believing they are, and so they're constantly trying to prove to themselves that this is them, this is them, this is them. And so, yeah, that's that part. So, also, a function of your ego is to judge. And that's basically what people are doing in all the stuff that I'm talking about. They're judging. They're judging themselves between another person, or, basically that. They're judging themselves like, yes, I am this image. But it's also just judgment in general will come from your ego. Because if you really think about it, if someone is pulled over on the side of the road, I highly doubt you have any idea why they're pulled over by the side of the road. Yet many people will make a judgment like, oh, his tires, he has a flat tire, like basic ass judgment, like didn't even spend any time on thinking about that. Like, yeah, he obviously has a flat tire. Like, no. And so this is something that a lot of people do just throughout their day. Like, see a person, the person acts a certain way, the person looks a certain way, just anything, and boom, there's a judgment. And that's the ego trying to say like, oh, like he's this, and that helps you understand that you are this, the fake image, right? And basically judgments are they're just going to be false a lot of the time, like very false, and they're just not going to help you love everyone, right? And so this is all stuff that you're mindful of. If you see yourself trying to reassure yourself that you're this image you've created for yourself, no, you're mindful, you're paying attention now, you've taken a step back, and you're now paying attention to that stuff, and you go, oh, there's the ego. If you judge someone, you go, oh my gosh, there it is. No judgment. Like, I know how silly that judgment is. I have no idea what's going on with that person or this situation. Or you go like, oh, that's my ego acting out of fear. That's fear-based right there. That's what that is. Like, someone beats you in a game or something, or a sport, and or someone's doing better than you in class, and you are angry about them, or you're thinking bad thoughts about them and stuff like that, or you're putting them down in your head. That's your ego acting out of fear, because it doesn't want to think that someone is better than them. Someone is threatening your image of yourself. So those are like some main components to be mindful of, okay? And this is all, it quiets the mind, okay? Because it's all about getting your nervous system used to low stimulation, and then honestly, dissipating the ego is just a big thing that you need to do, because it's a big function that just gets in the way of Dharma, the truth of reality. And so it's like one of the biggest steps to go with. Because the truth is that we are all the same thing. The consciousness in the back of my head is the same consciousness in the back of your head. There's just a different veil, or veils in front of it, like your thoughts and your feelings and all that, sort of. And that's like a big part of enlightenment, or getting close to enlightenment, is understanding that you are the only thing here. Where would you come from? Like, you're the only thing here. So, and of course the ego in the most like basic sense says, hey, I'm an individual, you're separate, I'm separate, that's separate, this is all separate. That's in the most basic sense what the ego's doing. But once you understand these functions, you realize how complex it is, and how it can affect you in complex ways, and how you can now understand the basic foundational functions of it to help you dissipate it, or at the very least to help you start being more loving. So yeah, that's the ego. We got more to come though.